All right, it's Mark, and it's time for another stop motion chat. And let me turn this off here. And hopefully, there's no technical problems this week. Um, last week, of course, we actually broadcast on the wrong YouTube channel, and so I think a lot of people couldn't find our show on last Thursday because it was a special show. And I think I logged out of YouTube, and when I logged back in, it signed me in as Mark Spess. And so I'm not really sure why with Gmail and YouTube why you oh oh let me make sure that's turned off. Nope, I didn't fall off the planet. I'm still here. um, so anyway, guys, to make a long story short, last Thursday's show I re-uploaded it, and it's on our channel now. So if you guys missed it, you can watch it. And next week we're gonna have the same guest back on the show from Argentina to discuss. Let me see here. Let me bring this up first. With Dante and Dan, you can see actually on our front page here. So if you guys want to watch it, the rerun it's here on our page. And yeah, why does it say device support like this? Let me make sure this actually works. That's weird. Well, it does work. But anyway, for next week, Dante and Dan and I have talked about a show for next week. We're going to discuss making armatures and puppets and having a live show to describe that as a as kind of a fun topic. And in Argentina, of course, it's hard to find a lot of products like armature wire and ball and socket armature kits. So yeah, there might be a delay on it. I think there is. It's kind of weird with YouTube lately. But anyway, next week's show should be fun, so definitely tune in for that. Also, I just want to remind everybody that for our monthly challenges, let me go here. And yes, here's a message. Claymara and I are talking about making a video as well to describe the monthly challenges and the prizes and kind of planning those, because I think a lot of people are having trouble planning their challenge entries because a lot of people run out of time, or they don't really, they try to make something too big. So every time we have one of these, it's only for 5 weeks, and while that seems like a lot of time, it's really not. And so I know we've extended it before. I think we had it originally for 1 month, and then we tried 5 weeks, and I think 6 weeks. And 5 weeks seemed to be like, where everybody was kind of comfortable getting a project done. So for this next topic, I just had a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and now I can't talk. But for this challenge, it's going to be the topic is fantasy, which is a broad topic. So anything kind of goes for these, but even though it's broad, it doesn't mean that your short film has to be so broad and long that you make an epic sort of film like Lord of the Rings or something like that. So anyway, so Claymar and I kind of discussed it, and we're trying to figure out. And yeah, Bobby Harling is saying, should we have like a quarterly challenge or something? Maybe make it even longer. And I think Nick Hilligas also said something to that effect, like we should extend it because a lot of people need more time. But I don't know. I'm thinking a lot of these things are just short, quick animations. Like I think we should try to stick within a time frame that's short. Or not too long, because it's more realistic to have a strict schedule. But then again, I don't know. People aren't being. It's not like you're in the studio and you're being paid either. So I don't know. But we are gonna make a short video just to kind of help people out and take it from there and see if it helps. And if not, we can discuss maybe extending it in the future. But I don't know. It depends on you guys. It kind of depends on, I think summertime is here, so I think a lot of kids are getting out of school. And, of course, people that have jobs, though, That's another issue. Yeah, so it's really hard to please everybody. But I look forward to making that with Claymore and just trying to come up with something that can make everybody at least more motivated, I think would be the word. All right. So that takes care of the basic news. So for tonight's show, the topic is going to be on making plastic model kits and putting together spaceships and things like that, which I know Neville and his film projects he's been working on, stop motion projects. He likes to use plastic model kits for his space stop motion adventures, and but I couldn't. I tried to find his page on Facebook and I can't find it. So, anyways, we are gonna look at some photos, and what I did, I went on Google. And I went in the image area and I searched for Star Wars models just to kind of get a broad term for things that are created in the Star Wars universe. And plastic models, of course, it can extend into miniature effects such as making buildings, dioramas, anything that you can immerse a person into using different materials and to realistically scale things down. So here, I think this is Fawn Davis. He's a very popular or famous person in the effects industry right now, especially with his work with Stan Winston, and he's been kind of getting his name out there more and more. But here he is on one of the Star Wars sets, and a lot of people thought that in the prequels that everything was made in computers, and it actually wasn't. But that's the thing, is sometimes you can't tell the difference between CG and practical effects, and a lot of people say it should be one or the other. Either it should be all computers, or it should be there's a whole debate about it. But tonight we're not really going to go into that. We're going to actually talk about just the practical stuff and hands-on creations that people have made. And Star Wars is so rich in its history of making worlds using plastic model kits and just imagination and spare parts and things like that. And let's see here, I think this might be some J.J. Abrams thing going on here, but there's going to be new Star Wars films as well, and I know there's a lot of excitement around it. And but the history is, here we have Phil Tippett. We had the creatures being made. But let me see if I can find. Where's that one picture? Is this it? This is probably the most popular one. Let's go with large. Let's see how big this picture is. But here is George Lucas, and you can see how much he really relied originally on making models like spaceships, the AT-AT walkers, speeder bikes, B-wings, X-wings, Y-wings, Star Destroyers. These are things that really look so amazing on screen, and they immerse you in what you're looking at. And that's pretty much what as an artist and a filmmaker that you want to do. You want to try to immerse people into your film and pull it off realistically to some extent. And of course, I think like Dante showed last time with his project, it depends on what you're doing. Not all films need to have obviously spaceship models, but the same kind of construction techniques and things like that are used can be extended into really any genre of film, from fantasy to realistic, modern houses, to rustic cabins in the woods and so forth. Okay, so Nick said before, where'd it go? Oops, it moved. So Stop Mo Nick says, hi all, I think 5 weeks is about right. That was his opinion on our monthly challenges. So you think 5 weeks is good? Hold on 1 second, guys. All right, so summer vacation has begun, and my son is out of school, and it's his first day home early, and he can't figure out what to do, and he's trying to tell me to fix his computer, and I had to tell him I'm doing a live show. So, anyways, so Ron Cole says kit bashing is the art of detailing your models with found parts from other store-bought model kits. Even the original Star Wars models for the movie have parts from kits all over them. Yeah, that's pretty much what they did, and also making silicone molds is another thing that is widely done. Let's see here. So here's a close-up of course, this is the Millennium Falcon, and you can see, and I believe this is a real one. It looks like this is the one that was on display. But looking up at a close-up, you can sort of pick out certain things like model kit car transmissions in here probably. Let's see if we can recognize anything. There's probably some, looks like brake pads for a model kit here, like a car brake pad or something. And all kinds of stuff on here, and there's pipes and tubes, and probably model tank parts and airplane parts. And but here this looks sort of like a what does that look like? It looks like an engine part of some kind there from a car or a truck. But all this stuff is essentially made from styrene plastic or cast in resin. And some of the parts are going to be things like metal tubes that you can buy, brass tubes or aluminum tubes, and painted. Here's some jet engine part kits you can see clearly. And they'll sort of glue all these things together and make it look nice. And sometimes to get rid of seam lines and things like that, they'll use like modeling putty to fill in gaps. They will light it with LED lights or fluorescent lights. There's neon tubes. There's fluorescent tubes, miniature ones you can buy. All kinds of stuff. And the other thing they do is, of course, is when they put it all together, it looks nice, and then they paint it. And they probably used here a lot of enamel paints to paint all this. And they'll do a lot of airbrushing. They will do washes, which is to take things like testers, enamel paints, and they'll take paint thinner and they'll thin out blacks and browns and reds, and they'll kind of get it really soupy, and then drip it down into all these cracks. And all these cracks, the liquid will go in there and spread out, and it will, the paint thinner will cause all that paint to go in there nicely. And after that, they'll wipe over the top parts if there's any dark spots on the edges, and you'll kind of get these lines. They'll use silver paints, and they will paint in an area, and then on the inside area of that, like here, you can kind of see. They'll paint like silver, and then they'll paint black over these parts to make it have some some depth to it, even though there's no depth at all. And so when they're done, sometimes they'll make sections, like for example, this section here might be a duplicate, whoops, of the other side, which I can't scroll anymore, but this here might be reproduced on the other side of the Falcon, and they might make a silicone mold of this and cast it in resin, and then they'll have a duplicate, so that way they don't have to have twice the amount of parts and things. There's just so much involved, but most of these things, it doesn't matter if it's a spaceship or anything else. Dry brushing and washes and things are all pretty much always done to give depth to a part. And there was like a spattering technique here that they used as well to kind of give it a gritty look, which I think George Lucas, when he was working on the first Star Wars films that came out from 75 to 86, the whole entire universe was sort of beat up, the Rebel Alliance and everything. So let's go back here. But they would use like a spattering technique where you'd sort of, it's not a very large picture. But again, you would sort of thin out your paints with paint thinner, and then once that was done, you would take like a toothbrush and dip it in there, and then flick the bristles to get like a spattering technique, which is done often. There's also vacuum forming, which is to create parts. Maybe for example, this round disc might have been vacuum formed. It's where you take some sort of object. Let's say this could have been, I don't know if that's big enough or not. It's probably too small, but let's just say for sake of argumentation here, you might find like a barbecue grill out there, and using a barbecue grill as a form, the top of it, which is round, you could make a mold of that with some simple materials like you could use silicone, but it's probably cheaper to use like a latex rubber, and make a mold by making several layers of latex on top, and then on top of that putting fiberglass or plaster. Then when that's cured, you can turn it inside out and fill that with more plaster and have the same exact shape you see here in plaster for you to vacuum form, which is where you have a vacuum pump underneath your plaster, and you heat a sheet of styrene so it's really soft and suck that plastic right over that form, and you can have a shape just like that, which you could stick on a model like this, which is actually pretty big. I think this might not be a stop motion. Is this one of the stop motion models? It actually could be. It's hard to say how big that is. So Ron says, scroll down here. So Ron says, when it flies by on screen, you can't see anything well enough to tell what it is anyway. So there's no need to sculpt it all. And Ron, he also says, in all three of the original Star Wars films, you see Star Destroyers, and all the time, but never a shot that shows the large cannons up on the top section. I never knew they were there till I saw the model. That's right. Yeah. Maybe they have a photograph of that I could bring up. Yeah, here's an original, but I don't think this will show the detail. What about this one? No. Actually, I know I've got some on my computer. But this one here looks like it's about 10 foot long or so, one of the Star Destroyers. And I think it's underneath here, or on top of here, where my mouse is, where those cannons are. But yeah, there's so many details that you don't see that are there. And here's a neat little diorama that somebody built, which is sort of the hangar for the Hoth base, I guess, in Empire Strikes Back. And they put this transport and some Y-wings and X-wings. And this here was definitely a vacuum formed piece, like I was talking about earlier, this large piece of styrene with all the little, ridges and everything here. And so Bobby says, no STP decals though, slaps knee. That's right. They should put some in there though, that'd be kind of cool. And Bobby says, did that with wood finishing all the time, splattering. Yeah, it's a pretty common technique. And let's see. This is sort of what I did as a kid. I used to make dioramas with model kits, and we would go to this place that sold model trains, and they had like simple flocking material for grass, and they had, which was actually wasn't flocking back then. When I was a kid, it was like a very fine sort of wood chip that they would sell, or like a sawdust, but they weren't really. It wasn't really dust. It was like little chips that were spiky and looked like grass, and you'd put Elmer's glue on plywood and sprinkle it on there and dust it off, and that was your grass, which was like this sort of horrible green color. Looking back at it, the worst possible stuff, and you kind of learn by trial and error too. Like if you ever try to build something like this, even if it doesn't come out nice, you learn so much. Here's Lego version of the Death Star trench. Yeah, so even in Legos, people are building these things in Legos, which is kind of cool. And Ron says, I made my own vac form machine. It's pretty easy. All you need is some wood, a shop vac, and a heat gun, plus screws, nails, and such, of course. And Nick says, I have one with a vacuum pump and a 50-liter tank to suck the air out of. That's pretty neat. I don't have one. One of my former friends built one with, I think he used a heat gun. He used, lights, hot lights and things like that to heat up the plastic. And it worked to a degree. I gave him some old plaster stormtrooper casts that I made, some helmet casts. And he tried it out, and it kind of worked. But I think the UltraCal 30 that I used, it wasn't porous enough. I think using regular plaster of Paris is a little bit more porous. But and Bobby says you can even blow on the fake grass to make it look more realistic. Hardly ever worked though. After gluing, I mean, he says. Yep, after gluing, that's the real trick. I don't know what you're supposed to do, but I've seen some people use like that fake fur, like green fake fur, and that works really good for grass. You take like hairspray, or you take glue and you put it in there, and you can kind of comb the glue into it and shape it. Kind of works. And then there's that Prince movie where they're using like paper. I guess Jamie Colleary and Anthony Scott, they were making a film, or making a film that we talked about a few weeks ago, and I think it was all paper, which looked really nice. But let me do something. Let's look up miniature sets. Yes, for movies. So here's some great little examples. So if we just look at this, we can sort of try and figure out, what did they do to make this? There's a lot involved. There's, obviously buildings. There's trees. There is miniature like grass and things. There's bush, like sort of weeds and plants, right? So, if we were going to look at this and say, well, if we were looking at a real building, how do we make it in scale? And of course, you'd have to figure out on paper. One of the first things you want to do is sketch out everything and figure out how much of a set you want to build for your shot. Do you envision like a huge landscape where you're looking like in a valley with hundreds of acres? Are you thinking about making something more quaint, more personal? Or are you trying to make a have an opening shot that shows where somebody lives, just to kind of get people to understand a little bit about the environment that the characters live in. Are they on a farm? Are they in a city, for example? So there's a lot of reasons why making something big or small can change your audience's understanding of what's going on from the get-go. So in this particular photograph, of course, we see some trees and so forth. My guess is that what this is, there's probably a table, and they probably, I think in the scale here is probably like 1/35th scale or so. That's my guess, judging from the size of the hand. So let's say 1/35th scale. You could actually figure out what size a real barn is and divide it, right? So you can divide it by, 30, make it 35 times smaller in all dimensions, all ways. And, so let's say this is, 1 foot long or so. So if it's 1/35th scale, it would be, around 35 feet in real life, which is probably, I don't know, it's probably taller than that, but let's just say that's pretty close. And also, you don't see the back so much of this barn, do you? I mean, you can see there's a window inside, but you're not actually seeing any detail in there. It's dark, and you can't see in any of the windows. You can't see anything in the back. So if you're making this as a set, you'd probably consider just making what you can see, which would be all these front-facing portions. That's the first thing. A lot of people, when they design something like this, they're thinking, wow, I should make the whole thing detailed. I should make the back. I should make the sides. But you don't really need to in the film, right? Especially if you're on a strict time frame. So you'd probably want to just build everything as it is in real life, but you probably wouldn't want to have shingles around everything where you're not going to see it. So you'd probably want to set your camera up. You'd probably want to take, for example, some poster board, and you probably want to make a quick mock-up of your set, and then put it on a table and stick your camera on there with the lens that you'd like, and see how it looks. And does anything need to be moved or changed or made larger or smaller for forced perspective purposes? For example, if you made this little house here even smaller, you can make it look like it's more farther away. So pretty much you want to set everything up, make it a cardboard rendition of the actual set for something like this. So that's basically the first thing you do. Of course, you have your reference photos most likely at this point, and then you can start building. And you can use balsa wood, you can use basswood, you can use thin plywood. You can even use plastic styrene to make most of this stuff. You can go to miniature dollhouse furniture places, any place that sells like kids dollhouses, or maybe going on the internet as well. You can probably find like miniature shingles at different scales. And Nick is gonna, he's saying, are those trees real ones a lot farther away? And I think they probably are. I think, I was gonna say this is probably outside in the natural sunlight, and that would make it, the most realistic lighting you can get, right? Is real. You can get some trees swaying in the wind in the back, right? So yeah, that's my guess too, is it's really outside. So the other option or other possibility for something like this is you can actually go take a picture with your a nice high quality digital still camera, and you can take a photo of some real trees and then print it out. Go to your local printing shop and print out a very large photo and hang it up behind your set. So you can do that as well. Back in Ray Harryhausen's day, if he was doing some stop motion on a set like this, and it was impossible to of course shoot outside without having the trees jumping all over the place between frames, he might actually take his camera and film some real trees, and then set up a rear screen projection system. So for every animation frame that he did, let's say he wanted to animate every one frame or 24 frames per second, he would actually, film the background plate, if you want to call it that, at 24 frames per second. So every time he advanced the film that was projected on the screen behind it, whenever he did his animation, everything would look natural when played back at 24 frames per second. You can also do that as well with chroma key or green screen or blue screen, whichever you like nowadays. You can hang up a green cloth behind your set, and then digitally remove the backgrounds and have an actual scene play out. It could be nighttime sky or mountains. Maybe you've traveled somewhere and you want to have a mountainous background. It can all be real and replaced. So there's really a lot of ways to do it, but I think in this case, as Nick said, this looks like it's probably really outside. And so building the base of your set can be made from really any material, but I think either plywood or some sort of stiff cardboard could be used. It depends on what you have access to. And I think for most of the audience, plywood is probably the most common thing, but MDF is also a good material, which is thick and heavy. It's basically like a pressed, it's kind of like a pressed board that is made up of sawdust and epoxy resins, I think. So that would be good. Of course, it would be more stable than something light like cardboard, but you can set up a table and so forth. You can build one out of 2x4s or buy one. And for grasses and things, like I said before, pretty much places that sell hobby, railroads, HO scale, railroad trains, things like that, for hobby purposes. And you can pretty much find any kind of greenery or plant material sold in bags. It's really inexpensive. And let's see here. Here's an example of what some of those materials look like. There's some flocking material on this particular miniature set that this person built. But let me see if I can find something to show you guys. Let's see. All right. So these are kind of the common things for outdoors, for outdoor sets. Not necessarily, obviously, spaceships, unless the spaceship crashes into like a big mountain or something. But they had things like miniature trees, which you can actually buy in packs. Looks like there's about how many are here? 14 mixed deciduous trees between 3 and 5 inches tall. And you'll pay about almost $25 for something like this, but let's check it out, see what it looks like. So here it is. Most of the time they sell these, they are cast rubbery, like vinyl tree trunks. And what they do is they put some glue on there and put moss on the outside. Now the cheapest way to do this, if you guys really want to try this out for yourselves one day, is you can buy bags of moss, or you can even go out in the outdoors, go hiking and find moss and collect it. And for the tree trunks, if you look at it, a tree trunk is essentially a scaled up stick, with little branches coming off of it. So if you can find like a bush or something, and a section of it has, the same kind of configuration as this, you can just cut it and save it, dry it out for yourself. Let's go outside, and then take some glue and glue some moss on there. So let's see what moss goes for here. Let's see, moss. Moss hedges. That's not really what I want. Let's see, dried moss. All right. Let's see. So this is kind of the typical thing you would do, is you would search for stuff on the internet and all right, so basically a 4-ounce bag, and it's actually a very light material, is somewhere around $6, you know, which isn't so bad. And this could make, you could take off little bits of this to make miniature, you know, plants, weeds, anything really. And if you probably line up all these parts, they could look like a fir tree. Let me go back here. Does it have even more? Dried plants. Well, that would be kind of weird. Now, if you're making a film where some kind of characters crash land on an alien planet, you could use corn, I guess. Never tried that before, but oh, okay. Welcome to the show, Telmo. And so Bobby Harling is saying that a 3x5 table outdoors with the diorama, with his diorama on top. Yeah, there's some people on Facebook that has some really great dioramas of like 1930s cars set up outside that way, which looks really cool. Let's see, decorative moss mats. See, I've never heard of this. Like, it seems like they've grown moss on some sort of a fiber. That's new to me. I've never seen that. That's 16 inch by 16 or 18 inches, I think, here, for $7. So a very large area you can use with that. But the kind of stuff I'm talking about is something like this. Let me see the images. Here we go. Let's visit this page and see if they're selling this. Dried moss assortment. Okay. Yeah, so for about $10, okay, you get a single bag of moss. And this is what you would essentially glue on some, you know, some sticks and things that you find outside to make up as your tree trunks. And it actually looks really great. And so let me see if here we go. Where was that stuff we were talking? Okay, so for the trees, we were saying that it's about $24.89 for, is it 14 of those? Really? Yeah, so 14 trees for $24, or $10 for a large bag of assorted moss, which you could use. So I'm pretty certain that it's cheaper to go with the moss, and there's another place selling it as well. Or it might actually be the same place, but here again is, you know, it comes in different colors, different shades of green. They will dye it as well. Here's some like orange and blue and red. It's actually pretty neat, isn't it? Light green, gold, lavender. So, you know, this is good for even sci-fi kind of environments as well. And Ron says, some of the best real plant matter to use for miniature trees are actually roots. The roots of most small plants have shapes that mimic a large-scale tree better than the stuff above ground. That's kind of good to know. I've never tried that. But they sell so many kinds of variations of moss. Pretty much anything you could think of to make miniature trees and so forth. And what else do we have? They have grass and earth. This is another popular kind of thing that I was telling you about. Different flocking materials and different colors for snow, blended earth, blended green. That's kind of interesting. So a miniature cornfield as well. And you can see that this kind of mimics the look of that last diorama we looked at with a little barn and so forth. So you could probably buy things like that straight out of a place like this if you really wanted to. We have field grass, which is, I'm not really sure what kind of fiber that is, where they get this. Static grass flock. Fine leaf foliage. So your imagination basically can run wild. All right. So I'm going to close this now. Another thing that is cool are where you can get a lot of ideas is by looking at war dioramas. And a lot of people build these for museums, and so they try to make things look as realistic as they can. They try to mimic what really happened in terms of battlefield strategies and all that sort of stuff. And you'll find a lot of really great artists out there making these, and they spend tons of time on them at different scales and everything. This is probably, again, somewhere around the 1/35th scale. But you can see like there's little miniature trees. It looks like they shot them up with bullets. So they've recreated all these historical battles and so forth. And you can kind of examine them and get ideas as well. Like, how did they make the dirt? How would you do that? And one of the tricks that is done for something like this is to take something like plaster of Paris and sand and rocks and mix them all together and sort of take and make it into a consistency where you can spread it out all over your set, which is sometimes made from styrofoam or paper mache as a base underneath. And you get that sort of texture. Then you can also, as it's drying, you can use tools to shape it, that sort of a thing. Now, Nick is saying that in Australia you can only get about 4 mixed deciduous trees for that price. Yeah, I guess it's going to be different everywhere, isn't it? And Ron says, when filling the canopy of a miniature tree, build branches only so small, then run brown sewing thread all over the place between them. When you coat that with glue and sprinkle your leaves, the string mimics the finest twigs. Cool. That's pretty interesting. What kind of thread is it? Is it like a nylon thread or something like that? I guess it would have to be, or even cotton, right? Something where it can break apart like really small branches. So these are things that, I used to just really get all into things like this, as a kid growing up. And here you can see they've recreated some water with perhaps a some kind of maybe epoxy or a resin, a clear resin of some kind. And again, you can see it looks like they had a brick kind of texture stamp, or probably not a stamp, but actually they probably brought this as like some sort of styrene sheets with this pattern on there. And it looks like they did like the plaster of Paris and probably some paint, some brown paint, and some sand and some rocks and things, and spread it all over to get this sort of muddy texture everywhere. This looks great. Here's an unfortunate plastic soldier that was shot. He's not having a good day. And Bobby says also, he says when he was a kid, he was all into war dioramas as well. I think most little boys are, you know. There's a neat little tank type car that was blown up. But you know, all this stuff here, all these techniques can be used for stop motion sets, and are, you know, all the same basic techniques, dioramas, miniatures. And here's some, this is great here. Whoop, go back. Even this, look at that, some miniature cornfield. I'm not entirely sure how they made these. That's great. Some grasses. Again, this is probably some sort of moss, natural materials. And Ron is saying, or Nick was saying, for small scale leaves, I saved the coarse sawdust from drilling holes in chipboard and soaked them in different shades of watered down paint. That's great. And Ron says that in regards to thread and tree branches, for making them really small and intricate, that any thread or nylon or cotton thread, it doesn't matter. And I catch the leaves in bunches you can see through, so it gives the illusion that there are tiny twigs there. Let's see here. So this here, it's just, there's no descriptions. These are just photos, I guess. But pretty nice work. Pretty nice work. Let me go back to, there we go. Here's a little, well, here's a good one here. And I'm not sure what scale this would be, but this is probably something like 1/72nd scale or something smaller, where they could put, you know, lots of figures in there. But you've got like these rolling hills. That's something that a lot of people are always ask, you know, what do you use? And when you're sticking a puppet on there for walking, you know, you're going to ruin your set and so forth. A lot of people make issue with, you know, destroying, they think they're destroying their set for puppets walking, and in a way you are, but that's a really common issue. Like if you have a rolling hill like this, what do you do? And you usually build it out of styrofoam. That's the first thing. You can use paper mache if you wanted to, but styrofoam is a really popular material, which you can cut up sheets with hacksaw blades or hot wire foam tools, and then you can actually sand everything nice and, you know, get these great gradual shapes. And when I worked for Webster Colcord, they actually built some sets in this sort of scale here for an outdoor. It was for a Warner Brothers outdoor movie theater, where you can drive your car up to a big screen and watch, you know, the Warner Brothers symbol there. It was like a station ID kind of a concept. And, you know, one of the puppets was really small, and we used Super Sculpey Flex, I think it was called, or it wasn't Super Sculpey Flex, but it was that flexible Sculpey you could paint. And so I made this little puppet out of it, and what we did is we used little, inside the armature, we used some wires that came out of the ankles, and we could poke them down into the styrofoam set, and every time the puppet would lift his leg up, the wire would come out but be facing away from the camera, so and behind the puppet, so you couldn't see it. And that was one of the ways we got around making characters, you know, really small characters like this actually walk on a styrofoam set. And when you pulled the little thin wire out, you couldn't even tell that there was a hole. And Bobby says this looks like Gettysburg. I think you're right. Let me see here. Most likely. I'm not sure. It almost looks like they use Photoshop to put these little smoky, smoky blobs here, but I'm not sure. You can sort of see through it. Maybe it's thin acetate or something that they airbrushed with white paint or something, so it's translucent. But yeah, it's kind of amazing what people, they spend all this time on these things. Here's another one. Look at this. Lots and lots of little figures. Now, I don't know if anybody would want to animate 100 characters in stop motion on screen at once, but you could do it actually if you cut up in sections on your set. Animate certain sections and then animate sections over here later and then over here. You could actually manage something like that if you do it the right way. But again, this is probably just a plywood sheet and lots of models and flocking material and sawdust and plaster and so forth. And so let me see here. Ron says they make a water-based contact cement for gluing foam together. Now that works great. It's a Home Depot item? Really? That's good. And it doesn't melt your styrofoam. Yeah, you're saying historically everything melts it. I know we sell some stuff in our store that it's made for gluing styrofoam as well. And but I have not tried it because I haven't built any sets from styrofoam in so long. So I don't know if it works as well as the Home Depot stuff, but it sounds interesting to try that. Now Nick says, I have several sheets of salvaged 3-inch styrofoam ready for set making. Horrible mess when carving it though. Takes months to get rid of the last bits of styrene floating around. Yeah. Gets everywhere. Oops. And so let's see. Now here's a pretty neat one, but it's a small photo of some water, a little boat here. Some Vietnam scenery. Most likely. So war dioramas are another place to get ideas and try and reverse engineer, how things were built. Here's a great big Civil War diorama here. Probably this is very accurate in terms of elevation and everything. They probably did this in a scientific way. But there's another thing that we could look up now. And what's it called? All right. So Warhammer is another great way to find some miniatures and to see what people are doing to build them and the different techniques they use to create scenery. And there's so many great examples. In fact, this is one of the things that I did for a while as well, was paint little characters from some of the see if this will work here. So here's some miniature characters in a sci-fi set, and you can see this person, did a great job painting this sort of alien creature and this woman who is trying to defend herself from this tentacle, and he's grabbing her. But you can see they've got some miniature chains in here. They've got some, looks like cabling of some kind, and maybe some kit bash parts. It looks like right here there's a computer fan. Looks like a computer fan right here that they've worked into their set. Some really cool stuff. Little parts, like maybe some switch parts and things that are all glued in there. Let's see if there's any more photos here. Part of this. Probably not, I guess. Let's just take a quick look. It says that that is a private library, so I cannot see any other photos there. So yeah, this is like a little display shadow type box that somebody built, and to display their characters that they painted. And it's sort of like set up like a video game where they're all walking around and they're fighting these aliens, and you know, it's just a lot of fun. But looks like they use probably different balsa woods here. Looks like balsa wood that they dry brushed with white paint, which is basically thickened, or paint which is fairly thick, and it's a lighter color that you just you dab your paintbrush in your paper towel and get a very thin coating of like white or some sort of lighter colored paint than what your part is, and you kind of go against the grain with everything, and the light stuff just kind of sticks to the surface areas and gives it some highlights. And it looks like they use black paint mainly, probably a spray paint. And some different parts, some screening here. So pretty nice. Right, so again, these are very small. Like most of these figures are like an inch tall or so. So this is not really. This is more like a jumbled mess of characters than it is a set, but you kind of get an idea of what they did here. Probably kit bashing stuff and from some Warhammer kit parts. Let's see. So Ron is saying that the pink and blue stuff, in terms of what you would almost call styrofoam, the white pebbly stuff is called something different. Despite that's, yeah, I think they call it poly extruded foam or something like that. It's a different kind of styrofoam, which is denser and does not have much of a grain to it, if you want to call it that. Like a pebbly sort of graininess, and that's one of the drawbacks. But still, if you sand the blue stuff, there is actually a grain to it, but it's more in like a wood grain. Like if you snap it, sometimes it'll kind of snap along different meridians, you know, if that makes sense. But and Nick is saying, I think the blue stuff is more fine grained, like a urethane foam, he says. I know in Warhammer they use that a lot. This one here, this might actually be styrofoam. Let me see what this image looks like. I think it might be, because you can see it's white underneath the base here. Just a piece of styrofoam, which I think they used a hot wire tool just to kind of shape the edges and bevel them, and then painted it up with looks like some natural rocks and things that they glued on there. And then they sort of embedded some of these parts, these plastic parts, and it looks like it was like a blown up wall of some kind. I think there's another view here. In fact, this might the thickness of it looks almost like that same kind of foam we're talking about, that pink or blue foam. So nice little diorama, simple. But using real rocks and things and gluing them down is another technique. And you can even take like clay and melt some clay on a piece of wood, and then press rocks into that clay and then paint over the whole thing. That also works as well. And Nick says it's not so easy to find in Australia, and never lying around in dumpsters for diving in. That's too bad. Yeah, we were moving one year from Pennsylvania to Springfield, Missouri, and they have a Harbor Freight Tools, and so we were trying to find empty boxes for moving, and Harbor Freight Tools was throwing away so many useful and good tools and things that we actually got lots of them. We got some drill bits, free drill bits, and all kinds of things. So you never know what you find dumpster diving in places like that. I'm trying to find, let's see here. Okay, here's like an simple little set. And, well, not really super simple, but you can see here they've got a set floor with looks like maybe some sort of tiles, maybe some tiles that you could buy to tile your kitchen walls with or something. And it looks like bricks and walls, which are very flat and simple, and then they've painted some stripes. And it looks like this may be a found plastic piece. It looks like one of those watch holders that you, if you go shopping, they sell kids watches with these sort of plastic containers, just like that. Looks like they probably cut it with some wire snips or something, or a saw, and modified it. And some miniature diagrams, which could have been hand created on paper and drawn with pencil, or painted with some oil, or not oil paints, watercolors, or perhaps dipped in some tea. I think Darkstrider on StopMotionAnimation.com, he likes to use tea to age some of his things, because it sort of stains the details, and I guess it probably smells nice afterwards too. So get some herbal tea smelling items. Now Ron says, I used to think the blue foam was expensive, but I recently used it to make a large landscape, and it was actually quite inexpensive. I think it's about, when I used to buy it, it was about $8 for a 4x8 sheet, which is actually pretty inexpensive. And Bobby says it almost looks like they used clay for this here, and then scribed it. That's possible. Yeah, you could use clay for a floor like this and sculpt it, and then paint over it with, acrylic paints, and it would look pretty similar. And Ron says that floor is a perfect thing to sculpt with the blue foam. It takes that kind of detail beautifully. Yeah, you could. And actually, I'm not, let me see here, not trying to make a sale here, but if you guys have ever visited my stop motion store, let's see here, bring it up. Yeah, let me see, where is it? Styrofoam set tools on here. Some of the tools that you can use to cut styrofoam. Let's see. Well, I'm not sure if this one has that particular tool. The Craft Kits probably has a video. But you can see what they use to actually, cut up styrofoam here. down? That's weird. So there is a technical issue for this week. I can hear it here. I don't know why you guys can't hear it. All right. Well, anyway, you can listen to my voice, and I'll have to work on that next week. But basically, hot wire foam tools like this are used to make cuts, plunge cuts, and so forth. It's really super simple to do, and it's not as messy as using something like a hacksaw blade and sandpaper. So that's one of the things you can use. The other thing you can just use for styrofoam is X-Acto knife blades, and you can use like I say, hacksaw blades. You can use you can actually texture it as well to a degree if you use a heat gun, but it's really smelly, and it's not really super easy to control. But you can sort of mask off areas with wood or other materials to block heat in certain places, and then heat it up with the heat gun and get a texture. You can also, with styrofoam, you can use spray paints, and you can lightly spray the surface with just like a sprinkle of spray paint and get a brick texture, because it sort of melts away everything. You do have to be kind of careful if you spray styrofoam too much with any kind of chemical. It'll just melt it into nothingness. So Bobby Harley is saying flamethrowers. Yeah, that will do it. They might have used a flamethrower on this one. I'm not sure. It's kind of a big hole, so it's very possible. Very possible. But now Nick is saying, don't have that rigid hot wire tool though. Mine needs wire stretched in a frame. Yeah, that's the typical kind of hot wire tool. But there's all kinds. I mean, if you guys are interested, we sell them on our website. But I think the cheapest kind I've ever seen, when I went to one of the stores that sells the 40K Warhammer kits, they've got this little, it's like a tube that you can put a couple of D batteries in, and then there's just two little electrodes with the wire in between, and it's only like maybe 6 inches or so long, and it sticks out like an inch from the base, and you can sort of cut your styrofoam with that. So it doesn't take a lot of power to heat up a wire and use that for cutting styrofoam, but you do have to be a little bit careful because if you can blow up your batteries if you short them out. There are plans on the internet on how to make those as well. We can maybe look it up. Hot wire styrofoam tool plans. So you can go on there and make your own if you're if you don't want to spend a lot of money and you have a lot of time. There are places where you can actually just make something simple like that. How well it would work, of course, depends on your level of skill, and of course depends on how much you can trust some of the people that make these designs. But it's a pretty straightforward process. And Ron Cole says that styrofoam in an oven pretty much vanishes. Don't try that at home, kids. Ooh, yeah. I bet it stinks too. Oh yeah, that's right. You can use hand files as well. That's true. To carve styrofoam, some hand files. That'll work. But anyway, I'm just kind of giving you guys some ideas. I don't really know. I just made up tonight's show on the fly, and I didn't really plan anything. I just thought, well, let's talk about set building, and so hopefully you guys enjoyed it. We are going to have a show next Wednesday. Like I said, make sure you're there because we're going to be talking about making puppets and how to make armatures if you live in Argentina. But the thing about that is that's going to be with Dante and Dan and Omericat again. The thing about that is that the same thing will apply to anywhere in the world as long as you have access to the materials and so forth. But anyway, check it out next week, and have a good week, guys. See y'all later.